Hello students, in the next video you'll hear me say that that video is the first in a series of videos, and I decided after finishing that video that it needed a prequel. So this is the first video in the series where you guys are going to learn a little bit more about what we can do beyond just basic primitives. So there are some ways that we can sculpt the primitives in our menu and turn them into other things. So we're going to start by making a flying saucer, and we are going to use a sphere as our base, believe it or not. So I'm going to take the move tool, and I apologize that my taskbar is in the way, but you guys know how to do 0, 0, 0 down for X, Y, and Z to make sure that it's there at the origin. I'm going to turn off the move tool by clicking on select, and then I'm going to hop over to the modify tab. And a few of you may have come over here when working on your snowman, but the modify is the next one over from the create, and this is where the interesting things happen. So I mentioned to you guys earlier to ignore the segments, so we're going to be talking a lot about the segments today. So if we click and drag this value, you can see that the lower number of segments we have, the more jagged or our sphere looks, and then the more we add, the smoother it is. So we want kind of a basic number of edges here. We don't want it to be too crazy, so that's decent. Maybe a few more. There we go. Okay, so that is our sphere. So how do we turn this into a flying saucer? Well, we go into the modify list and we go through. There are tons of these in here. They do all different things, but for us beginners, we are going to focus on one of the most powerful tools that is in 3D Studio Max for modeling, the Edit Poly modifier. So once we add that, what's going to happen is we're going to get all sorts of options down here. So let's start with the selection menu. You can see that if we click on the first button called vertex, we can show that we have all the individual points, little control points in our sphere, and we can actually move those around, but we're not going to do that. We can also select our individual edges. I'm going to skip this guy for the moment, but we'll get back to it. We can also select by polygon, which are the individual faces. So say I want to make a flying saucer. I can just click and drag over this entire band here and select. You can see everything all around. I can also accomplish that by clicking on one, holding shift, and then clicking the one next to it. That will also select a band around the outside of our 3D sphere here. So once I have that set of faces selected, I'm going to scroll down to the Edit Polygons section, and I am going to use the Bevel tool. Actually, I'm going to do the Extrude first. Nah, I can't decide. I don't want to make this too complicated. We're going to do the Bevel. I'm going for it. So there's two different things you can do in the Bevel tool, but the first one I want you guys to use is the top one, and by dragging that up, whoa, that's weird, right? That's not what we want. We want to make sure that we have local, the group normals, no, not group normals, local normals selected. And you can see now that as we drag out, whoa, all of a sudden we have something that looks a little more like a flying saucer. Now, the thing with Bevel that's cool is that once you've brought your edges out, you can also scale the edges. So if I drag, you can see what that's doing to the edge. It's giving that kind of tapered edge, but you don't want to get too crazy with this, because if you do, it's going to like invert it and get wacky. So be careful. All right, so that's that. What else could we do here? Well, we could make a top and a bottom to our flying saucer. We could click and select up here and press delete on the keyboard. Likewise, we can do the same on the bottom. Delete the top and the bottom. So now we have something that looks a little more, but we have these openings here. That's where the loop comes in. Once we have an open space, we can click on that loop and it will select it. Then we can get new choices down here, and we can use the cap feature, and that fills it in. Do the same thing, select it, cap it. There you have it. So this flying saucer looks decent, but we're going to use the Turbosmooth modifier to smooth it up, make it look a little bit more like a flying saucer. So not super detailed, not super high quality per se, but give you an idea of how with a couple of basic edit poly tools, you can take a sphere and turn it to something completely different. And if you want to add additional detail, you can turn off the Turbosmooth, go back to edit poly, and continue to fine tune. For example, I could click that top part, use the scale tool, and shrink it a little bit. Do the same thing at the bottom, shrink it a little bit. And then if I put Turbosmooth back on, there you go. Looks even more convincing. So you can continue to play around with this and turn off Turbosmooth, go back to edit poly, make adjustments, and whatnot. And you can add more and more detail to your model. So in the next, actually, before I end, no, I'm going to end there. Can't get carried away. So in the next activity, you are going to do a similar thing using Edit Poly. You are going to take a box and you are going to model a fork with it using the same tools by using the selection of the faces, polygons, the edges, and using our Edit Poly tools to under Edit Geometry to make a fork. So stay tuned.